When passengers mock a fallen soldier, Donald Trump's bold response stuns them all. The airport was alive with its usual chaos, passengers rushing through the terminal, families navigating luggage carts, and the steady hum of announcements echoing overhead. It was a scene of organized disorder, a mix of excitement and exhaustion as people waited for their flights. In one corner of the terminal, a group of passengers gathered near the seating area, their conversations louder than the rest. They were complaining about various inconveniences, the overpriced coffee, the long security lines, and the inevitable delays. Their chatter blended into the background noise until an announcement suddenly cut through the air. "Ladies and gentlemen," the voice on the intercom began, clear and solemn, "we will be having a brief delay as we allow military personnel to board with the remains of a fallen soldier. We ask for your patience and respect during this time." The words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, the terminal grew quieter. Some passengers paused what they were doing, glancing around as if to gauge the reactions of others. A few nodded silently in understanding, while others returned their attention to their phones or conversations. However, in the corner where the group had been chatting, the atmosphere was different. Instead of falling silent, they exchanged looks of irritation. A man in his late 40s, wearing a business suit, leaned back in his chair with an audible sigh. "Are you kidding me?" he muttered loudly enough for those around him to hear. "We're being delayed for this? It's not like it's going to change anything." A younger woman beside him, scrolling through her phone, chimed in, "Seriously, it's just a soldier." They knew the risks when they signed up. Why should everyone else have to suffer because of their choices? Her words were sharp, dismissive, and tinged with an indifference that made a few nearby passengers visibly uncomfortable. An older woman sitting across from them shot them a disapproving look but said nothing. Another man in the group laughed lightly, shaking his head. "They always make such a big deal out of this stuff. I get it, respect and all that, but come on, we have things to do. This is just over the top." Their voices, filled with contempt, began to grow louder, drawing the attention of more passengers. Some people glanced over, their expressions a mix of discomfort and disbelief. A young mother sitting nearby pulled her child closer, as if shielding him from the negativity. Among the passengers was Donald Trump, seated a few rows away from the group. He had been waiting for his flight quietly, wearing a dark suit and tie, his signature presence understated yet unmistakable. He had a small entourage with him, but they were keeping a low profile, blending into the crowd. Trump's eyes narrowed as he listened to the group's comments. His posture stiffened, and his hands, resting on the armrests of his seat, tightened into fists. He was no stranger to criticism or confrontation, but this was different. This wasn't about politics or personal attacks. This was about respect for a sacrifice that was far greater than any delay or inconvenience. He glanced around the terminal, noticing the reactions of other passengers. Most were silent, their expressions ranging from disapproval to discomfort. A few looked like they wanted to say something but didn't dare. The group's voices, however, grew bolder, filling the space with their dismissive remarks. One of the men in the group leaned forward, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Maybe they should just put a priority line for these things. Get it over with quickly so the rest of us don't have to suffer." The woman beside him laughed, adding, "Or better yet, do it when the airport isn't busy. It's not like anyone's going to notice anyway." The audacity of their words sent a ripple of unease through the terminal. A few passengers exchanged glances, silently questioning whether someone would step in. The older woman who had glared at them earlier looked as though she wanted to speak up, but ultimately turned back to her book. Trump, however, couldn't stay silent. He had always been a man of action, someone who believed in standing up for what was right, even when it wasn't popular. He felt the weight of the moment pressing on him, urging him to do something. He leaned forward in his seat, his expression hardening. His security detail noticed the shift in his demeanor, exchanging cautious looks. But Trump held up a hand, signaling them to stay back. This was something he needed to handle himself. As he stood, his tall frame commanded attention. The noise in the terminal began to fade as people noticed him. Whispers rippled through the crowd, some passengers recognizing him immediately. Others, who hadn't been paying attention before, turned their heads to see what was happening. The group of complainers fell silent as Trump approached, their expressions shifting from irritation to confusion. They hadn't expected anyone to confront them, let alone someone as prominent as Donald Trump. Stopping a few feet away from them, Trump crossed his arms, his gaze steady and unyielding. The room seemed to hold its breath, the tension palpable. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but carried an undeniable authority that demanded attention. "Do you even understand what you're saying?" he began, his tone measured yet cutting. "You're sitting here, complaining about a delay, while a family is grieving the loss of someone who gave their life for this country, for your freedom, for your safety." The man in the suit opened his mouth to respond, but Trump held up a hand to stop him. "No," he said firmly. "You've said enough. Now you're going to listen." The terminal was completely silent now, every eye fixed on the scene unfolding before them. Trump continued, his voice growing stronger. "That soldier didn't ask for your gratitude, they didn't ask for your respect, but the least you can do, the very least, is stay quiet and show some decency, because without people like them you wouldn't have the freedom to sit here and complain about delays." His words hung in the air, cutting through the tension like a knife. The group of passengers who had been so vocal now looked down at their feet, their faces flushed with embarrassment. The man in the suit shifted uncomfortably in his chair, while the woman beside him avoided Trump's gaze entirely. Around the terminal, other passengers began nodding in agreement, some murmuring quiet words of approval. The young mother who had been holding her child looked up at Trump with gratitude in her eyes. Even the older woman who had been reading her book set it aside, her expression softening as she watched the scene unfold. Trump stood tall, his presence commanding yet unassuming. He wasn't looking for recognition or applause. He simply couldn't stand by and let the sacrifice of a fallen hero be disrespected. As he turned to return to his seat, a quiet murmur spread through the crowd. It wasn't loud or obtrusive, but it carried a sense of unity and respect that hadn't been there before. The atmosphere in the terminal had shifted, the negativity replaced by a solemn understanding of the moment's significance. For Donald Trump, it wasn't about making a statement or being in the spotlight. It was about doing what was right, about standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. And as he sat back down, he knew he had done just that. Donald Trump had been sitting quietly in the corner of the airport lounge, observing the situation unfold. His usual routine involved keeping a low profile in public, but the scene before him struck a nerve. The blatant disrespect directed at the announcement of a fallen soldier's return was too much to ignore. He shifted in his seat, his gaze fixed on the small group of individuals who had been making callous remarks. The murmurs of discontent grew louder, their voices carrying an air of entitlement. A man in a sharp business suit, likely in his 40s, leaned back in his chair with an exaggerated sigh. "Why does this have to happen now?" he grumbled loudly. "We've got places to be, and we're stuck waiting for something that doesn't even matter to us." A younger woman, scrolling through her phone, smirked. "Exactly," she said. "It's not like this is the first time a soldier's died. They knew the risks. Why should we all have to wait for them?" Her dismissive tone was met with nods from others in the group, emboldening their audacity. Another man chimed in, "This is ridiculous. If they want to honor the guy, they should do it somewhere else, like a private ceremony or something. Why inconvenience all of us?" Their words echoed through the terminal, cutting through the usual hum of airport noise. Nearby passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances, some clearly offended but unwilling to speak up. A young mother clutched her child protectively, shooting the group a look of disapproval before turning away. An elderly couple, sitting a few rows away, shook their heads but remained silent. Trump, however, had reached his limit. The man who had once stood at the helm of a nation, commanding respect and attention, now found himself compelled to act, not as a former president, but as a citizen who believed in the values of honor and sacrifice. He pushed himself to his feet, his imposing presence immediately drawing the attention of those around him. The group continued their conversation, oblivious to the growing tension in the room. Trump's height and stature made it impossible for him to blend in, and as he began walking toward the group, the murmurs of other passengers quieted. Whispers spread through the terminal as people recognized him. "That's Donald Trump," someone murmured. "Is he really going to say something?" another asked, leaning forward in anticipation. The group of complainers finally noticed the shift in the atmosphere. The man in the suit glanced up, his expression turning to one of mild annoyance as Trump stopped in front of them. "What's your problem?" the man asked, his tone half amused, half defiant. "Why do we have to stop for this? It's not like it's affecting us." Trump's gaze locked onto the man's, unwavering and sharp. He took a step closer, his voice calm but filled with an authority that commanded attention. "You think this is just about a delay?" he asked, his words slicing through the air like a knife. The group shifted uncomfortably under his scrutiny, but Trump wasn't finished. "That soldier," he continued, his voice steady but firm, "gave their life for this country, for your freedom, for your safety. They didn't hesitate when they signed up, knowing full well the risks involved. And you're here, complaining about a few extra minutes of waiting?" The terminal grew even quieter, the weight of his words sinking in. Passengers who had been previously uninterested now leaned in, captivated by the confrontation. Some nodded in agreement, while others simply listened, their expressions unreadable. The man in the suit opened his mouth to respond, but Trump raised a hand, silencing him. "No," he said firmly. "You've said enough. It's my turn now." Trump turned slightly, addressing not just the group but the entire terminal. His voice carried a tone of conviction that resonated with everyone within earshot. "Freedom isn't free," he said, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "It comes at a cost paid by men and women who are willing to lay down their lives so that the rest of us can live ours in peace and security. That soldier you're so casually dismissing made the ultimate sacrifice. The least we can do is show a little respect." The younger woman in the group, who had been scrolling through her phone earlier, now looked down, her face flushed with embarrassment. Another man in the group shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding Trump's gaze. "If you can't understand that," Trump continued, his voice growing stronger, "then maybe you need to reconsider what it means to live in a free country, because without people like that soldier, you wouldn't have the right to sit here and complain about a delay." The silence in the terminal was deafening. Even the airport staff, who had been bustling about moments earlier, paused to listen. Trump's words had struck a chord, cutting through the entitlement and indifference that had permeated the room. The man in the suit finally managed to stammer out a response. I didn't mean any disrespect," he said, his voice faltering. Trump's expression softened slightly, but his tone remained firm. "Then show it," he said. "Stand up. Honor the sacrifice that was made. If you can't do it for them, do it for the family that's grieving their loss right now. Show them that their loved one didn't die in vain." The man hesitated, glancing at his companions. One by one, they stood, their earlier bravado replaced by shame. Around the terminal, other passengers began to rise as well, some placing their hands over their hearts, others bowing their heads in silent tribute. Trump stood tall, his presence commanding yet unassuming. He had said what needed to be said, and as he returned to his seat, the atmosphere in the terminal had shifted. What had begun as a moment of disrespect had transformed into one of unity and reverence. For Donald Trump, it wasn't about making a statement or seeking recognition. It was about standing up for what was right, about reminding people of the values that made the country strong. And as he sat back down, the applause that broke out across the terminal confirmed that he had done just that. As Trump finished speaking, the terminal was enveloped in a heavy silence. The murmurs, complaints, and uneasy glances that had filled the air moments before were gone, replaced by a profound stillness. The group of passengers who had mocked the fallen soldier now looked thoroughly ashamed. Their earlier bravado had vanished under the weight of Trump's words, leaving them staring at their feet or nervously fidgeting. The room collectively held its breath as the airport gate opened and a group of uniformed military personnel entered. They moved with solemn precision, carrying the flag-draped coffin. The visual impact of the soldier's final journey struck a chord with everyone present. Even those who had remained indifferent until now felt the weight of the moment. For a brief second, all that could be heard was the soft shuffle of boots on the polished floor as the soldiers made their way toward the waiting plane. The sound of the coffin being gently placed onto a cart reverberated through the terminal, a stark reminder of the gravity of the sacrifice that had been made. Donald Trump stood motionless, his tall frame exuding a quiet strength. He had said everything that needed to be said. There was no need for further words. His actions, his presence, and his ability to demand respect for the fallen soldier had spoken volumes. He placed his hand over his heart as a gesture of respect, his expression a mix of reverence and determination. One by one, the passengers began to follow his lead. A young woman who moments earlier had been scrolling through her phone now stood with tears streaming down her face, her hand over her chest. An elderly couple near the back of the terminal stood shakily but proudly, the man's trembling hand holding his hat over his heart. A child asked their parent why everyone was standing, and the parent whispered a soft explanation about honoring the brave. Even the group of complainers, clearly embarrassed by their earlier behavior, stood awkwardly. The man in the suit who had been the most vocal shifted uncomfortably, his arrogance replaced by visible remorse. The younger woman who had dismissed the sacrifice earlier now seemed unable to lift her gaze from the coffin. They were humbled, and the impact of their mockery hit them with full force as they witnessed the solemn ceremony unfolding before them. The atmosphere in the terminal had shifted completely. What had started as a scene of casual disrespect and entitlement was now transformed into a powerful moment of unity. Strangers who had been impatiently focused on their own lives now shared a collective understanding of the price of freedom. As the military escort reached the plane and the coffin was carefully loaded aboard, a ripple of applause began. It started hesitantly from an elderly veteran sitting near the back and quickly spread throughout the terminal. The applause wasn't loud or jubilant, it was slow, deliberate, and filled with gratitude. Donald Trump remained standing, his expression steady but emotional. A veteran in uniform approached him quietly, saluting him with a look of deep respect. "Thank you," the veteran said softly, his voice trembling with emotion. "You reminded all of us what respect truly means." Trump returned the salute with a small nod, his eyes reflecting the gravity of the moment. For him, this wasn't about making a statement or gaining recognition. It was about standing up for the values he believed in: honor, sacrifice, and respect for those who gave their lives for the nation. As Trump returned to his seat, he noticed the change in the people around him. Passengers who had been strangers moments ago were now exchanging understanding glances, some even offering comfort to one another. A mother held her child close, explaining in soft tones why everyone had stood in silence. A businessman, who had initially seemed indifferent, now wiped his glasses, his eyes red with tears. The group of complainers had gone completely quiet, their earlier arrogance replaced with visible shame. They no longer looked defiant or dismissive. Instead, they seemed deeply affected by the weight of what they had witnessed and the powerful words they had heard. As the applause faded and the military personnel exited the gate area, the terminal returned to a quieter hum. But the atmosphere was irrevocably changed. No one resumed their casual conversations or complaints. Instead, there was a shared sense of respect and reflection. Trump's bold response had not only silenced the disrespect, but had also reminded everyone present of the importance of gratitude and honor. In that moment, he had turned what could have been an incident of indifference and mockery into a profound tribute to a fallen hero. The passengers, including the once disrespectful group, left the terminal carrying a sense of humility and reverence they would not soon forget. As the plane prepared to depart, carrying the soldier on their final journey, Trump sat quietly, his heart heavy but resolute. His words had sparked a change, and the unity he had inspired in the terminal was a testament to the power of standing up for what's right. Even in the most ordinary moments, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more meaningful stories with you.